did was I identified the gaps. What was my initial gap? What did I see first? I said there was no one with my particular skill set in the leadership space. There's one gap. I'm an executive coach. I didn't just read a book or take a course. I have a master's degree in coaching. I said, who else has a master's degree in coaching? No one. No one in my space. No one in my space. No one in this space. No one was doing lives, and still are not, in the leadership space with a master's degree in evidence-based coaching. Now, that was my specialization. My major was industrial and organizational psychology. Don't ask me to spell it. Right? But I still had the specialization in evidence-based coaching. I said, everybody's a coach. Everybody's coming off the bench as a coach, but they don't really know what they're talking about. They're giving advice. They're just having a conversation. Like, they don't know the science. They haven't read a peer-reviewed article and probably wouldn't be able to distinguish one from a page in an encyclopedia if they saw it. I said, hold on, there's a gap. What was the next gap I saw? Leadership's face was different than my own. There was some transformation stuff taking place. There was some motivational stuff taking place. There was some business stuff taking place. But when it came to leadership, there was a specific face that came with leadership. When people thought of leadership, they thought of a specific demographic and a specific age. I'm not going to say any more than that. You can draw your own conclusions, but it wasn't young and it didn't look like me. I said, ooh. I said, there's another gap. And I said there was a need. There was a need. People who looked like me came from where I come from. They needed a representative for leadership. Because if you ask them about leadership, they would tell you that it's religious. But it's not. Let me say that again. If you ask people about leadership, they would relate it to religion. It was tied to religion. They would say it was religious, but it's not. And why did they think that? They thought that because of the norm. The norm was that a specific demographic held the title and context of leadership. Content and context, they looked a specific kind of way and they were a certain age. And since I wasn't of that demographic nor that age, leadership couldn't look like me. I said, I beg to differ. I saw a gap. People who looked like me needed a representative for leadership. No one was stepping up to the plate. I said, cool, got it. I know what's needed, especially during COVID. So what happened during COVID? Everybody sat down. All of the leadership sat down. Everybody shut their mouth and they were waiting to see what was going to happen because everyone was scared and running around for their lives. They didn't know what was going to happen, so nobody wanted to really speak. Me, on the other hand, I stood up. When everybody else sat down, I stood up and then I opened my mouth and started to speak and help people who look like me establish themselves online in business. If you go back, if you look at my history, if you go back to March, February, I was in the trenches. I was literally in the streets after they shut it down. I had to make a decision and pivot into the home, but even when I came in the home and did lives when no one else was doing them. Everyone was quiet. Everybody was waiting for the results. Everybody was waiting for what's the verdict? Everybody had their fingers to the pulse. They had their covers over them. They were under the bed. I was in your house, in your phone, on your computer, telling you, no matter how bad it gets, just remember that your decisions decide your legacy. The worst that it can get, the worst that can happen is not really what happens. The worst that can happen is the way you respond to it. Write that down. Write that down just for your personal sanity. The worst that can happen is not what can happen. The worst that can happen is having a weak response. It's not leadership. So when COVID happened, I filled 3 gaps. I filled 3 gaps. I stepped into a leadership space with a different face. I stepped into a leadership space and a coaching space with credentials. A little different. And when everybody sat down, I stood up. So when you are going about your freedom run, how you're going to get out of your job, the first thing I want you to do is really take a good assessment. Take a good assessment of the environment. Do a panoramic. Like an eagle. Go up to the top of the building. Go up as high as you can. Look down on the landscape and take account of who's doing what, what's being done by who, where the gaps exist, and how you can fill them. If you're uniquely situated, uniquely credentialed, uniquely experienced to fill those gaps. Does everybody understand what I'm saying? Just put it in the chat if you understand what I'm saying. Just give me a heads up if you understand what I'm saying so I can move on. I really need you to get this. In Facebook world, if you get this, if you understand this, put something in the comments. If you feel different than me, if you oppose what I'm saying, that's fine too. Put that in the chat and we'll get up on that.